The afternoon I met Sloane, I was supposed to be somewhere else. My regular spot, a small bookshop on Ossington that also sold pour-over coffee, and had exactly 4 tables nobody ever fought over, had a paper sign taped crookedly to the door. Closed Thursday and Friday. Family emergency. Sorry for the inconvenience. I stood there in my coat with my laptop bag on my shoulder, and felt the particular irritation of someone whose routine has just been quietly dismantled. It was already past 2. I had a client proposal due by 5, and I needed somewhere quiet enough to think. Somewhere that was not my apartment, where the upstairs neighbor had recently decided that Thursday afternoons were the right time to rearrange what sounded like every piece of furniture he owned. So I pulled out my phone, looked up coffee shops within 4 blocks, and picked the one with the most reviews that mentioned quiet. Fieldwork was on a corner just off Queen West. Exposed brick, high ceilings, a long bar along one wall, small tables pushed back far enough from each other that you could have a conversation without anyone hearing it. I had passed it a dozen times and never gone in. Inside it smelled like fresh coffee and something baked, maybe cardamom. I got in line and looked down at my phone to find where I had saved the proposal draft. That was when I felt it. The specific feeling of being watched. Not uncomfortable, just distinct. Like a change in air pressure. I looked up. She was 2 people ahead of me. Dark hair pulled back, one loose piece falling across her cheek. A gray coat, a canvas tote over one shoulder with what looked like a rolled-up architectural drawing, sticking out the top. She was turned slightly toward the menu board, but she was looking at me. Not the way people accidentally meet your eyes in a line. She was looking at me the way someone looks at something they have already made a decision about. Most people glance away, she did not. I was the one who looked down first, back at my phone, pretending to read something. When I looked up again, she had turned toward the counter. I heard her order. Cortado, whole milk, 1 sugar. Her voice was even. Not loud, the kind of voice that did not need volume to carry. When I got to the register, I ordered a black coffee. Then, I do not know why, it was not the kind of thing I did. I was not the kind of person who made gestures like this to strangers in line. I said, "And the cortado, I've got both." The barista raised an eyebrow. The cortado for her? Yeah. He rang it up. I paid before the second thought arrived. She was waiting near the pickup end of the counter. When I walked over, she looked at me directly. No performance of surprise. "That was yours?" she said. "Yours, actually. I didn't ask you to." "I know, that's usually why people don't." She studied me for a moment like she was running a quick calculation. "So what was the reason?" "I didn't have a good one. Nothing that would hold up." "You looked like someone who was here to actually work," I said. Seemed worth encouraging. She looked at me for another second. "That is not a reason." "No," I admitted. "And you still said it." "Apparently." Her expression shifted. Not a smile exactly, more like the early conditions for one. She picked up her cortado. "Thank you." "You're welcome." She walked to a table near the back wall, sat down, unrolled the drawing from her bag, and weighted the corners with her coffee cup, and a small stone she pulled from her coat pocket. She did not look up again. I found a table 2 away from hers, opened my laptop, and spent the next 40 minutes getting approximately nothing done on the proposal, and spending a disproportionate amount of mental energy not looking in her direction. I left at 4, still 10 minutes of work short of where I needed to be. I was halfway to the door when I realized I had left my phone charging on the table. I turned around and went back. She was still there. Drawing still spread open, pencil in hand. When I came through the door, she looked up immediately, like she had been expecting the interruption. I grabbed my phone from the table, held it up briefly in her direction, as if explaining myself. She looked at the phone, then at me, then back at her drawing, without saying anything. But the corner of her mouth moved. I left. This time I made it all the way to the street. I told myself I went back the next day, because fieldwork had better natural light than most places I knew. That was at least partially true. It was also the kind of reason that sounds like a reason without being one. My regular spot was open again. I walked past it. She was not there. I went again Friday. Still not there. By the end of the week, I had started to notice small things about the room that I would not have paid attention to before. Which tables got afternoon light? Which corner was quietest? How the traffic outside sounded different in rain. None of it had anything to do with her specifically. That was what I told myself. Monday was cold. The first real cold of November, the kind that comes off Lake Ontario and means it. I almost worked from home. Instead, I put on a heavier jacket and took the streetcar down. She was there. Same back table. Drawing replaced by a laptop now, but the same stone holding down one corner of a paper beside it. She looked up when I walked in, not because I made noise. She just looked up directly at the door, like she had heard something only she could hear. I ordered my coffee and stood there deciding whether to walk over or not. The decision I arrived at was not really a decision so much as my feet moving before I had finished making it. I stopped beside her table. This is going to sound like a line. She looked up at me, patient and unreadable. Is it a good one? Probably not. Then sit down, she said. She moved her stone to the side of the paper to make a small, clear space on the table. Not exactly an invitation, more like an acknowledgement that the situation had already been decided. Let's find out. I sat. I was suddenly aware of my coat, my coffee, the way I had not thought about what I was going to say after the first sentence. You came back, she said. I liked the coffee. No, you didn't. She said it the way someone says something they have already confirmed. Not unkind, just precise. I laughed, which was not what I planned to do. It's fine coffee. You came back Tuesday, Thursday, and Monday. I set my cup down. How do you know that? She took a sip of her cortado and looked at me over the rim. I'll tell you later. She did not tell me that day. I learned quickly that when she said later, she meant later on her timeline, not mine. She closed her laptop halfway and we talked for 30 minutes, while the afternoon light moved across the brick wall. She was thorough in conversation, not chatty. She asked questions that went one level deeper than most people's questions. She did not fill silences the way people do when they are nervous. Her name was Ren Alcott. It suited her. Precise, a little unusual, not trying to be anything it wasn't. She was a structural engineer at a firm downtown, had been there 6 years, was starting to feel what she called the ceiling effect. Not a glass ceiling, she clarified, more like the ceiling of a room she had built herself, and was now bumping against from the inside. She said it plainly. She seemed to prefer plainness. I told her I was in UX research, that I spent most of my time trying to understand why people behaved differently from what they told you they would do. She thought about that for a moment. That sounds like something you find genuinely interesting, she said. I do. Most people say that about their jobs and mean something else. What do they mean? That they're good at it, and they've confused that with caring about it. I looked at her. Which one do you think I'm doing? I don't know yet, she said. That's why I said it. After that, the table became a kind of ritual neither of us named. I arrived around 2 most days. She was almost always there first, already settled, drawing or laptop open, the stone doing its quiet job in the corner. The first few times she kept working when I sat down. Then one afternoon, without comment, she closed the laptop the moment I pulled out the chair. I noticed. She noticed that I noticed. Don't make it significant, she said. I wasn't going to say anything. Your face was. I started to learn her rhythms. She did not do small talk before coffee. She responded to texts in batches, not immediately, which she told me once was a system and not rudeness. She kept a paper calendar, not a phone one, because she said she thought better with a pen. She had grown up in Halifax, moved to Toronto for school, stayed for the work, and had not yet decided whether staying had been the right call or just the easiest one. I told her things too. About a project I had been proud of 2 years ago that now felt like someone else's work. About how I had started to wonder, Whether the thing I was building toward professionally was actually something I wanted, or just something I had said I wanted. For long enough that it had become load-bearing. Ren listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "What would you do?" she asked. "If the thing you were building toward turned out not to be the point?" "I don't know." "That's the honest answer," she said. "Most people skip straight to the replacement plan, so they don't have to sit with not knowing." I looked at her. "Is that what you did? With the ceiling effect?" She picked up her coffee. "I'm still sitting with it." The mornings, and then afternoons, built into something I did not have a clean word for. Not a routine exactly. More like a standing agreement that neither of us had put in writing. One Tuesday she came in later than usual, coat damp from sleet, looking irritated in the way she looked irritated, not visibly, just tighter, more compressed. "Bad morning?" I asked. "Site review." She sat down. "The contractor ignored 2 of my load calculations and is now very confident about why he was right to do so." "That sounds expensive." "It will be, for him." She pulled out her laptop but did not open it. "I have a dinner tonight, firm thing. Everybody performing enthusiasm at each other." "That sounds exhausting." "It is useful," she said, "which makes it worse." I heard myself before I fully decided to say it. "I could come with you." She looked at me. "Why?" "Because I know how to exist in rooms where everyone is performing. You realize you would not know anyone. I know how to ask people about their work until they forget to be interesting at me." Ren studied my face for what felt like a long time. Then she said, "Wear something that doesn't look like you're trying." The dinner was at a restaurant in the financial district, the kind of place with cloth napkins, folded into shapes, and a wine list the size of a paperback. Ren was already outside when I arrived, in a dark green dress under her gray coat, hair down for the first time I had seen. I said nothing about it, but I had to recalibrate something internally before I could speak normally. "Don't be weird," she said. "Already slightly weird," I told her. "Keep it below the threshold." Inside, the room was full of the particular energy of professional people being social under mild obligation. Ren moved through it efficiently. She spoke to people with focused attention, asked good questions, extracted herself cleanly. I gave her space and worked the edges of the room, which is something I am actually good at. I talked to a junior associate about load-bearing systems and a partner's wife about the renovation she was doing to a house in the beaches, and a man who had very strong opinions about the gardener that I mostly just nodded along with. At one point, a man in a blue suit had cornered Ren near the bar and was going long on a topic she was visibly done with. I walked over, asked him a question about permitting timelines, and watched him pivot toward me like a compass finding north. Ren stepped back and disappeared into the room. 10 minutes later, she materialized at my elbow while I was stuck with someone explaining a multi-level parking structure concept in significant detail. "Your colleague is looking for you," Ren said, nodding toward the far side of the room. I excused myself immediately. We walked away together. "You saved me," I said quietly. "He was on the 4th level," she said, "underground." "I owe you." "Yes," she said, "you do." Later we found a quieter corner near the window, far enough from the main conversation that we could actually talk. The city was dark outside, the CN Tower lit up, the lake invisible past the buildings but still there, which is something you feel when you grow up here. "You're better at this than you let on," Ren said. "So are you." I never said I wasn't. I said I found it exhausting. Those aren't mutually exclusive. "No," she agreed, "they're not." I said her name then. Just Ren. I had been about to follow it with something light, a joke about the parking structure man, something that would keep us at the same comfortable distance. But I looked at her, and whatever that sentence was going to be did not arrive. She looked back at me, her face shifted, not dramatically, just a degree or two, like a room when someone opens a window. "We should head out," she said. The cab ride was quiet and not uncomfortable. Her shoulder was close to mine, and when the car took a hard left on King, she did not adjust away. Outside her building on Wellington, rain was still coming down in that thin, persistent way it does in November, making everything shine. She stood by the door with her keys already in her hand. "Do you want to come up?" No challenge in it, just the question, direct the way she was direct about everything. "Yes," I said. She unlocked the door, and I followed her in, and it did not feel impulsive. It felt like something that had been building by degrees. Since that first afternoon, all those small increments, finally adding up to the same answer. The next morning I expected awkwardness. That specific morning after tension, where both people are performing normalcy. Instead, Ren was already in the kitchen when I came out of the bedroom, in a white t-shirt and dark pants, coffee maker already running. "How do you take it?" she asked. "Black." She poured it without ceremony and handed it over. We sat at her kitchen table, small and wooden with a watercolor print of the Maritimes on the wall above it, and talked about nothing in particular. The dinner, the parking structure man, the fact that her contractor was going to receive a very thorough email that morning. She almost laughed once. Not her usual almost smile, but something that got further before she caught it, and she looked mildly surprised at herself. When I got up to go, she walked me to the door. I was reaching for something appropriate to say when she said, "Same time tomorrow." "At fieldwork?" She looked at me like that was obvious. "Unless you've found somewhere better." "I haven't." "Then same time." I believed her. Monday I arrived at 2. Her table was empty. I told myself she was running late, ordered my coffee, opened my laptop, watched the door. She did not come. Tuesday, same thing. I sat at the table anyway, which in retrospect was something I should have examined more closely. Wednesday I almost went to my old bookshop spot. I ended up at fieldwork. Her chair stayed empty. By Thursday I had started going back through everything. The cab ride, her kitchen. The way she had poured my coffee without asking how I took it, same time tomorrow. I turned the phrase over trying to find the part I had misread. With Ren I could believe she had meant it in the moment and then reconsidered. I could also believe I had misunderstood. She was not the kind of person who left things vague, but she also was not the kind of person who did things without a reason. Both possibilities felt equally possible and equally lousy. Thursday evening, my phone buzzed. No name of a restaurant, just an address on King East and a time. 7 like. I stared at it for a moment. I replied, "Okay." The address was a wine bar I had been to once for a work thing. Small and low-lit. The kind of place where the tables are far enough apart that conversations stay private. Ren was already there when I arrived, sitting with a glass of water and no phone in her hand. She looked composed, the way she always looked composed. But something underneath it was different. Like a building that is structurally sound but has been through weather. "Hi," she said. "Hi." I sat down. The silence that opened between us was the first one in weeks that felt difficult. She looked at the menu, then closed it. I handled this badly. That was not what I had expected. I had expected a clean explanation, something organized and delivered calmly. Not that. "You disappeared," I said, "after same time tomorrow." "I know." The server came and we ordered food I was not particularly planning to eat. When he left, Ren put both hands flat on the table. "I'm used to running my own projects," she said. "My own schedule. I know which variables I can control and I control them. I don't leave things to chance if I can help it. And I was a variable you couldn't control." She looked at me steadily. "You were something I hadn't planned for." I wanted to stay annoyed. I had earned it, I thought. But there was something in her face I had not seen before. Not exactly fear. More like someone acknowledging a structural flaw they had been hoping to ignore. "My mother ran a contracting business when I was growing up," she said. "She trusted a business partner who was keeping 2 sets of books. By the time she found out, we'd already lost the house in Halifax." She said it evenly, but her hands tightened slightly against the table. "I was 16. After that I learned to read documents before I signed them." to verify things, to not assume that people's intentions match their behavior. So you decided to only rely on yourself, I said. I decided that trusting people blindly was something I couldn't afford. That settled between us and stayed there. I told her things back. Things I hadn't planned to say. About the project I had spent 2 years building, that had been cancelled in a single meeting. About the particular hollow feeling of being told your work was excellent and then watching it get shelved for reasons that had nothing to do with the work. About how I had started to perform confidence in things I had quietly stopped believing in, and how unsettling it was to realize how long I had been doing that without noticing. Ren listened. At one point she reached across the table and put her hand briefly over mine. Just for a second. Then she pulled it back, like the gesture had surprised her too. By the time we stepped outside, the evening felt more breathable. The sleet had stopped, and the sidewalk on King was wet and reflecting the restaurant lights. I was about to ask where we went from there when Ren said, "Before you answer anything, I need to tell you something else." The way she said it made my chest tighten before I knew why. What? She drew a slow breath. The first afternoon at fieldwork wasn't random. I looked at her. "I knew who you were before you walked in," she said. The street noise went quiet. The way noise goes quiet when your brain is suddenly doing something else. "What does that mean?" "Your firm was being considered as a research consultant on a transit project my company is tendering for. I had looked up your work, some interviews, your portfolio, your LinkedIn, enough to have a sense of your schedule." "My schedule?" "Your regular place, the bookshop on Ossington. They post on Instagram. They'd announced the closure 2 days before. I knew you'd likely need somewhere else. Fieldwork was the closest good option." I stood very still. "You positioned yourself there?" "Yes." "The table, the drawing, being in line." "The drawing was real," she said quietly. "The table, yes. And then, I bought you coffee. That I did not plan." Something shifted in her face. "I want to be honest about what I planned and what I didn't." I laughed once, short and without anything warm in it. "So that's the part you didn't plan?" "Yes." Everything reorganized in my head at once. The way she hadn't looked away when I caught her watching. The way she hadn't seemed surprised when I came back for my phone. The way she knew I had returned on Tuesday, Thursday, and Monday. What had felt like something rare and strange now had an architecture behind it. Wires where I had thought there was just electricity. Her voice was quieter. "The first meeting was strategic. I told myself I was creating a professional opportunity, an informal way to establish a connection before the formal process. And after that? After that, it stopped being strategic, and I didn't know how to correct for it." "So you disappeared." "I panicked," she said, "which is not something I do, and I handled it badly. I looked down the street because looking at her directly was too much right then." She kept going. "I did not expect to want to close the laptop. I didn't expect to tell you about my mother. I didn't expect the dinner to feel different because you were there. I didn't expect to feel like I'd made an error when you left in the morning, and I didn't know what to do with that. So I didn't do anything, which was the worst available option. I wanted to be the kind of person who could say something clean and conclusive right then. I wasn't. I need a few days," I said. Ren nodded. "No negotiation. Take them." A cab was coming. I raised my hand. "You should have told me sooner," I said. "I know." I got in. Through the window, I could see her standing on the wet sidewalk under the restaurant overhang, still and straight, watching the cab pull away. I could not work out, in that moment, which part of it hurt more, that she had built the opening deliberately, or that every single thing that came after it had felt completely real. I did all the things people do when they are thinking hard about something they are pretending not to think about. I went to work. I sat in a planning session and contributed appropriately. I went for a run along the waterfront trail in the cold and thought about nothing except the cold, which was a lie but a useful one. I made pasta at home and ate it standing at the counter, which is a thing I only do when I am avoiding the kitchen table, for reasons I haven't admitted to myself yet. I kept coming back to the same two things. The first was what she had done. She had researched me. She had identified a gap in my routine and inserted herself into it. She had let me believe a chance meeting was real when she had deliberately engineered the conditions for it. That mattered. I did not want to be the person who waved it off because the outcome had felt good. The feeling of something should not be the whole argument for it. The second was everything after. She had closed her laptop when I sat down, and she had not made a production of it. She had asked questions that assumed I was capable of honesty with myself. She had told me about her mother in a wine bar on King East, when she could have kept it organized and professional forever. She had said I panicked when I was fairly sure she would have preferred any other available description of herself. And she had told me, when it would have been easy to never tell me, when I would not have known, when the thing was already past the point where revelation was strategically useful to her, she had told me anyway. That part would not leave me alone. Saturday afternoon I called her. She picked up on the second ring. "Meet me at fieldwork," I said. "An hour." A pause. "Okay." When I got there she was already at the back table. No laptop, no drawing, no phone in her hand, just Ren sitting with a cortado in front of her, looking less managed than I had ever seen her. I ordered my coffee and walked over. She did not speak when I sat down. "You built the opening," I said. "You knew where I'd likely be. You chose the table, the position, the timing, and when I came back you let me believe the whole thing had happened by accident." She held my eyes. "Yes. That hurt. I know." Not as an abstract. It made me question everything I thought I understood about what was happening between us. Every conversation, every morning, the dinner, all of it. She did not look away. She did not explain herself or correct the terms or try to move me toward a more comfortable version of what I had said. "I hear you," she said. I looked at my coffee, then back at her. "But the rest felt real," I said. "The conversations, the mornings. You telling me about Halifax when you didn't have to. You telling me last week when you didn't have to." I paused. "I can't explain those away." Her hands were still on the table, but her fingers shifted slightly, like she had stopped herself from reaching forward. "I should have told you before. It became the kind of thing that needed a wine bar and a serious conversation," she said. "Yes." I was afraid of what it would cost. That was not a word I had expected from Ren Alcott. Not that I thought she didn't feel fear. More that I had assumed she had found a way to make it irrelevant to her decision-making. "Afraid of what exactly?" I asked. "Of losing the only thing in the past 2 years that didn't feel like something I had managed into existence." That landed. The cafe moved around us. Cups, the bell above the door, someone laughing at the table near the window. I let it fill the space for a moment. "If we continue," I said, "I need honesty to be non-negotiable. Not comfortable honesty, not honesty when it's easy. The kind that costs something." "I know. And I'm not saying I'm fully over it. I wouldn't believe you if you said you were." That almost made me smile, almost. Ren reached into her coat pocket and set something on the table between us. A piece of paper folded once. Graph paper, the kind she used for site calculations. She slid it toward me. I unfolded it. 5 words in her handwriting, precise and dark. "From here, nothing is calculated." I read it twice. Then I folded it along the same crease and put it in my jacket pocket. "We start from here," I said. "No positioning, no managed first impressions, no variables." Ren nodded, and this time her smile came all the way. Not the almost one, not the measured version. The one that had briefly appeared in her kitchen and disappeared because it had surprised her. This time she let it stay. We sat at the same back table where she had first unrolled her drawing. Same cortado, same black coffee, same November light coming through the high windows of fieldwork. But this time I knew exactly how I had ended up there. And so did she. And that turned out to matter less than I thought it would. Write in the comments, if someone planned the first moment but told you the truth before it could have stayed buried, would that change what came after? Or would you still need to start over completely? I kept coming back to a question I could not quite set down. What do you do when something real grows out of a beginning that wasn't? Ren had planned the opening. That's just true. She had researched me, identified a gap in my routine, and placed herself inside it. When I caught her watching me across that line at fieldwork, it had not been chance. She had known where to stand. And for a while after she told me, I could not stop seeing the whole thing differently. Every morning at that back table, every conversation, the dinner, her kitchen, I kept looking for the seams. But here's what I kept running into. The things that had actually moved me were not things you can manufacture. She closed her laptop when I sat down and did not make a speech about it. She told me about her mother and the house in Halifax when she had nothing to gain from telling me. She said I panicked out loud, which I am fairly certain cost her more than she let on, and when it would have been so easy to stay quiet, when the first meeting was already far enough in the past that I would never have known. She told me the truth anyway. That is what I kept coming back to. Not the engineering of the first moment, but the choice she made later, when honesty was the harder option. I think about the kind of courage that takes. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that announces itself. The quiet kind, where you already know what the truth might cost you. And you say it anyway, because you have decided that being honest matters more than being safe. Ren is not a person who does things without thinking through the consequences. That makes what she said on that sidewalk on King Street more significant, not less. And I think about what it took for me to sit back down across from her at field work. After I had processed it, it would have been easier to decide the first lie was disqualifying and walk. That is a clean story. Instead, I had to actually think about what I knew of her, about who she had been in every moment after that first engineered one, about whether the architecture of something can be separated from how it was built. That required a kind of rigor I did not know I had until I needed it. What I understand now that I did not understand then is that both things can be true. The beginning was calculated. What came after was not. Holding both of those at once, without collapsing them into a simpler story, is harder than picking one and being done with it. Ren handed me a piece of graph paper with 5 words on it, and I put it in my jacket pocket. From here, nothing is calculated. I have thought about that line more than I expected to, not because it resolved everything, but because it was a commitment made without a safety net. She had no guarantee I would stay. She said it anyway. That, more than any first meeting, planned or not, is what I decided to trust.